Welcome to the Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and this is where characters gather. I'm outside this morning. The chickens are out, so you may hear them in the background. Fireball desperately wants me to throw balls for her, so she's probably going to be interruptive. But it is a nice day outside. It's supposed to rain, so I'm going to try and get this done before it rains. Little housekeeping. Over Memorial Day, I reached 500 subscribers, so I'm floored, I am grateful, I'm shocked. If you are new here, thank you for subscribing. I hope you find something you have never heard of to read before. If you are a returning subscriber, I appreciate and am so grateful for each and every one of you. You have no idea. I never thought I would, reach 10 subscribers, let alone 500. It's mind-boggling. And, as I always jokingly but truthfully say, I'm just an old lady who loves to talk about books. Nothing about my channel is changing. I'm still just going to be an old lady that loves to talk about books. So, I have not done an update of any kind for my reading in May. And I'm probably not finishing anything else at this point in the month. So I'm going to go ahead and film my monthly wrap up. And if I do finish something between now and Friday, I'll just include it in the June. So let's talk about the DNFs first. I'm going to talk about the hard DNF. And then I have 2 soft DNFs. One is borderline hard. So let's do the hard one first. That would be Shattered Sanctuary by Nancy Mayl. This was a gifted copy from Amanda over at Book Lover Amanda. This is Christian romantic suspense. It is the first book in the Erin Delaney mystery series. And it is my last Nancy Mayl book. I'm done. So this was supposed to be the Erin Delaney mystery series. One would suspect that the protagonist would be the main character. Unfortunately, that is not the case. I read roughly half of this book before I couldn't take it anymore. So, story opens up. You're introduced to Erin Delaney, and she is a former cop suffering from PTSD. So badly is she suffering from PTSD, mind you, that she has agoraphobia. Like, she doesn't leave her house. She is now a best-selling author because she wrote a fictionalized version of what happened to her. It became a bestseller. Now her publishers want more books. Her public is clamoring to meet her, and she can't leave her house. As part of the research for her book, she interviewed Kaylee Quinn from the Kaylee Quinn series, and Kaylee is now married, and Kaylee suggests that they meet up for a long girls' weekend. I think it may have been a week, in a cabin in a town called Sanctuary. Erin and Kaylee have never met in person. Erin, who is suffering from agoraphobia so badly that she cannot leave her house, blindly agrees to drive in excess of 8 hours to meet a stranger she's never known, to stay in a place she's never heard of, and a cabin she has never seen. She breaks up her 8-hour drive to stay overnight in a motel. And then she meets a strange man at the strange cabin she's never been to get the keys, and he gives her the creeps. So let's just talk about all of that. She has agoraphobia, but she agrees to leave her house to meet someone she's never met in person. She has agoraphobia, but she's going to stay in a strange motel room in a strange town. She has agoraphobia, but she's going to go stay in a strange town, in a strange cabin, after meeting a strange man who gives her the creeps, to spend, a long weekend, a week, whatever, with a stranger she's never met in person before. That didn't just stretch the boundaries of credulity, it makes no logical sense. And as soon as Kaylee arrives in the cabin, the book shifts to Kaylee being the prime protagonist. And of course, there's a serial killer because Kaylee's in the book. It's too much. And then we get to the theological problem in the book. And let me see if I can find it. Hang on, I'm going to find it because it's so important. Okay, I found it. This is Kaylee and Aaron having a conversation after, of course, discovering a dead body in the woods. And Kaylee is a believer and Aaron is not. And they are talking about God. And Aaron brings up the Old Testament. And this is Kaylee's response. What people call the Old Testament is a collection of writings during a time before Christ. Things were different then. Not sure where some of the bad things came from. Okay, it goes on. But I have a serious theological problem with calling the Old Testament a collection of writings. This was a buddy read with Taylor for me, and I really wanted to finish this because I enjoy buddy reading with Taylor, but I couldn't. I couldn't. This conversation happens on page 99. I DNF'd it somewhere around 175 or so. And seriously, the Old Testament is not just a collection of writings. It is the Word of God. And you cannot have the New Testament, which fulfills the Old Testament, without the Old Testament existing. So, the reason I am no longer reading Nancy Mayl is A, I have a theological issue with this book, but B, her books are all very, very predictable. There's always a serial killer. There's always more suspense than romance, which I'm fine with, to be honest. But you can tell that these are very plug and play books. There is always the same structure. There is always the same pressure points. And the endings are always rushed. And she runs out of words on her contract. And so things have to get wrapped up too quickly. And they're just not enjoyable for me. They're just not. The pacing isn't, sorry, girls are playing, isn't stellar. The whole repetitive nature of her series is just getting old, and there are other things to read. Fireball! Every once in a while, Fireball gets protective of her balls. So, the repetitive nature, the theological problems, the absolute predictability of the books, there are just far too many books to consciously make a decision to read an author. I know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and nothing is going to surprise me or be incredibly enjoyable. So that is my last Nancy Mayl book. Okay, the next one is definitely a soft DNF. That is Faith Bass Darling's Last Garage Sale by Linda Rutledge. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this book. I am not in the mood for mother-daughter family dynamics and drama, and I will pick this back up. I am roughly halfway through. It is completely enjoyable. I am absolutely enjoying the dialogue, the writing, all of it. I'm just not in the mood right now for mother-daughter drama. And to be honest, I am tired of a plethora of only mother-daughter drama. I don't know how else to put it. And when you see my June pile of possibilities, I will talk about this more, but yeah. Okay, the other soft DNF is, and this one is a potential hard DNF, was the book club choice read for May, which was Emily of New Moon by Ella Montgomery. Discord has been active. People are reading it. A lot of them are enjoying it. However, I was not one of them. I DNF'd this a little less than halfway through. So you can see the echoes of Anne. This was written years after the Anne series. In Emily's imagination and her connection to nature and her open and generous spirit. You can see the echoes of Anne and Emily. And then you get to all of the characters surrounding Emily, which are awful. The adults are borderline, if not flat out, emotionally abusive. Emily is, when the book opens up, a little girl whose father is dying and he hasn't told her yet. And the housekeeper takes it upon herself to one night announce, oh, by the way, your father's probably going to die in the next 2 weeks. Without her father's permission, she just, blurts it out and goes from there. One character in the book lets Emily believe that she's been poisoned because she snuck an apple. Her aunts decide to take her in after her father dies and tell her, oh, you're grieving. We don't care. We hate cats. You can bring one, but not both. Who does that? It is just not Anne. And I wasn't expecting it to be Anne. I wasn't expecting this to be so dark and so despondent. And she's just a little girl that is not loved by her family and those that are taking care of her. And, the kids in the new school where she goes to school for the first time are horrible. And, she doesn't have an adult to talk to people with. It just, I'm sure eventually it gets better, but it was not an enjoyable reading experience for me this month. I hope people read it and enjoyed it and are having a good time with it. It just isn't me this month. So, and that's okay. Sometimes books just don't work. Could be your mood, it could be what's going on in your life, but this one, it didn't work for me this month. It just didn't work for me this month. Okay, so I have my calendar, so I don't forget to talk about a book, which is good because I would have forgotten to talk about the very first book in the month. So let's do the books on my Kindle first. And first up would be Murder at Highgate Cemetery by Irina Shapiro. This is available on Kindle Unlimited. It is the first book in the series that just flew out of my head. Series name will be underneath the book. This is set in the Victorian era, and we have a male detective with the Met. And we have a grieving sister who wants to find out why her brother was run over by an omnibus. And They inadvertently team up. Our detective is a widower. He is still grieving at least 3 years after his wife was killed as a result of his job. He's addicted to opium. He's got a high profile case he has to solve. And this was just a cozy, but a harder cozy. And I absolutely adored this book. I will read more from her. I have a hard copy of a different series. The first book I picked up from Library Bookshop a couple weeks ago. The rest of the series is on Kindle Unlimited, and there's no romance. It's just a tightly woven police procedural, historical, cozy without being lighthearted. There's nothing lighthearted about this book, but the characters are great. It's very well written. It's very well edited. It isn't slop, and it was full of twists and turns, and I so appreciated the twists and the unpredictability of the text, and the fact that characters were fleshed out with room left to grow as the series progressed. It was just a delight. It just absolutely was a delight. And I was eager to pick up another one, but I had other things to read, so I didn't. Okay, then I read on my Kindle Volume 5 of the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon. And this was just a beautiful palate cleanse, epistolary, quick, easy read. I loved every minute of it. There is some emotional depth at the end of this one. I admit I teared up at the end of this one. But at the end of this volume, a lot of Emma's past is, she's come to terms with it, and you can tell that in the next volume, like the next phase of her life is going to kick off. And I don't want to say too much because it would all be spoilers. These aren't very long books, but they're just a delight. My recommendation still stands. Read volumes 1 and 2 of this together. It is a better reading experience if you do that. They're all available on Kindle Unlimited, and they're just fabulous. I am reading volume 6. It's currently downloaded on my Kindle. I will probably finish it this week, but you never know. So that would be Emma. Then, based on Ronnie, thank you so much, Ronnie, for this recommendation to read Christy Woodson Harvey. I picked up A Happier Life, and I don't regret it for one solitary moment. A Happier Life was a recommendation from Ronnie, and it is a Southern novel, which is perfect for the Southern Charm Readathon. And it is a very reminiscent of early Mary Kay Andrews books, except there's no swearing. And this one is set in North Carolina, and our protagonist, whose name just flew out of my head, and Mr. Mosquito, you can go away. She loses her job in New York City. She is then convinced by her mother and uncle to go clean up the family home in Beaufort so that they can put it on the market. And this house has been in their family for hundreds of years, and She has never been there. She's in her mid-30s, and suddenly she is in Beaufort trying to figure out her life while renovating a home she's never stepped foot in. This is a beautiful novel. There is a little thread of romance. It's self-discovery. It's a family drama without it being full of mother-daughter angst. It is discovering who your grandparents were and the family history you didn't know you had. There are certain things a Southern novel does, Southern women's fiction does really well, and it is epitomized by this book. Everything right about Southern women's fiction is in this book. You know, it's got dual timeline in it as well. It just, I don't want to say too much because this book was so good. And I loved every minute of it. Like, I knew from the opening paragraph, how good this book was going to be. In fact, I will read you the opening paragraph. Hang on, let me pull it up. Okay, this is the opening paragraph from the prologue. Houses outlive the people they love. When my fellow clapboard houses on Sunset Lane in Beaufort and I were being built by shipbuilders just discovering this port, proud and young and new, we had no idea what our futures would hold. How could we? In 1769, we were the first houses on this street, as much pioneers as the fishermen, whalers, and shipping merchants, like the St. James family, my family, who made us their homes. But what we understood immediately was that it was our job to care for the families who lived within our wooden walls, often repurposed from the ships they came in on, who loved us, who filled us with furniture and bedding, crotchety aging grandparents, and howling beloved infants. It was our job to remember every word spoken, every breath breathed, to store their secrets and successes, heartbreaks and joys, and keep them safe. Those are the opening two paragraphs. If that just doesn't scream evocative Southern women's literature, it just And the other thing I truly loved and appreciated in this by this author is that her chapters have titles. They're not just chapter 1. It's a chapter 1 with a title. And you know who's talking, you know what ear you're in, you know what to, you know what's going to happen. Oh, hello, Miss Kilu. But you're wet and you're not coming in Mama's lap because you're full of rainwater all over your head and back. So, unloved Missy, go dry off in the house or go lay down on the sofa. Okay? I just ordered a hard copy of Slightly South of Simple by the same author. It is the first book in her Peachtree Bluff series. And I cannot wait to get started. It's sitting in my dining room, screaming at me to read it. She is absolutely going to be a new favorite author of mine. I have absolutely no doubt about that. Okay, so next up on my Kindle, I read what's it called? The House Next Door by Anne Rivers Sidden. This was my first book by this author. It was on Kindle Unlimited, and it's another one that won't be my last book by her. This book is Southern Gothic. There's not a year set, but it's got to be mid 1970s, maybe 1980, but no later than that. And like I said, first book by her. And this tells the story of, their names just flew out of my head, a married couple who live next door. And when the book opens up, they are talking to a media outlet about the house next door and how nobody needs to buy it ever again. And if someone does, they are prepared to, at a minimum, burn down the house. And you're like, wait, what? The book then unfolds into 3 parts in which we learn about the 3 previous residents of the house next door. It goes from a vacant property to having this very modern house built on it, and what happens to the people that come in connection with the house. This was a very moody and at times creepy but truly wonderful read. Is it going to be for everybody? No, it is absolutely not. If you tend to avoid darker themed books or are just leery of the unknown, then this probably isn't for you. However, it's wonderfully written. It is beautifully creepy, and it is so well done at keeping the suspense and the sense of unease throughout the book that you cannot help but be compelled to just dive in and read until it's done. It isn't a huge tome. It's like 350, 400 pages, if that. And honestly, I couldn't put it down. There is no happily ever after. There is a giant twist at the end, and it was so good, y'all. I need to read more Southern Gothic because that book had me invested, and that I love when I get water on the calendar. I see you, Missy. What are you doing over there? Okay, so that is it for Kindle reads. So, what did I finish? Sorry for Felicity barking. She's way over on the front fence, so hopefully it isn't very loud for you guys. These are in no particular order as to being finished. First up is A Very French Affair by Sue Roberts. This was under 250 pages. And nope. I apologize. It was 265 pages. And completely clean. It is a second chance romance in which there is even no hint of the romance until you are a good halfway through the book, if not 60% of the way through the book. And it really is a journey of family and self-discovery and coming to terms with decisions you made in your past and how those decisions affect your future. And it was just, I read this immediately after The House Next Door, and this was totally different in tone. It was much more lighthearted. It was much sunnier in nature. It's set in the south of France in summer. It was a lighthearted read without necessarily being cheesy and fluffy. It wasn't even remotely cheesy or fluffy. It was fantastic, and I need to read more by her. They're not very, this book was not very long. She has 3 other books at the time this was published. So this was published in 2018. They are all holiday books. So one is My Big Greek Summer. Another is My Very Italian Holiday. And the last one listed is You, Me, and Italy. So they're not going to be, brain melters or high stakes drama. They're just going to be comfort reads without being cheesy. Best way I have to describe them. Okay. So, next up would be The All Girls Filling Station Last Reunion by Fannie Flagg. This delightful book was my introduction to Fannie Flagg. It will not be my last Fannie Flagg book. And this one is set in Alabama. It is dual timeline. It is set in Pulaski, Wisconsin, and what is the city in Alabama? Point Clear. I loved this book. There is depth to the story. Our protagonist is in her 60s. She's, been married forever. She's got growing kids. She's got an aging mom. And she learns all these family secrets she didn't know existed, but apparently everyone around her did, but thought that she knew and didn't want it. Why there is mother-daughter drama in this book, it is minimal, and it is much more a journey of who am I in relationship to all these secrets I just found out? And what does my life mean based on all these secrets I just found out? Girls. So, it will not be my last Fannie Flagg book. I have 2 or 3 others sitting on my shelf, and I need to pick up the remaining ones I don't have based on the strength of this one book. Seriously, this is just Southern women's fiction. There's not a better word for it. There's not a better description for it. There is a beautiful story told. It's about family, and it was so good. I almost threw my quote-unquote pile out to just go read the other Fannie Flaggs on my shelf. But I chose to leave them there to be savored when I needed a good, reliable read. Don't regret that decision, but at the same time, I do. Okay, next up was a book set in Mississippi. That would be Sycamore Row by John Grisham. This is the sequel to A Time to Kill, which is my all-time favorite John Grisham book. And A Time to Kill was his very first book written, and it was published it tells you in the author's note in the back. Time to Kill was published in 1989. And it wasn't a runaway hit until it got its movie released in 1996. And this book was published in, I believe, 2014. Let me check. 2013. It's obviously set in Mississippi. Jake, Carla, Hannah, the entire town is dealing 3 years. It's 3 years after the events of A Time to Kill, and the repercussions of that story are still echoing in Clanton, Mississippi. And hi, baby girl. The book opens up with Jake. Well, the book opens up with, what is all the fluttering about, ladies? Everything's fine. It's Felicity. Everything's fine. So the book opens up with a suicide being discovered, and nobody knows the man. He's, lived in town most of his life, and he has flown, or just outside of town, under the radar. And his body is discovered on Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon by one of his employees. He was instructed to go find the boss. And Monday morning, Jake goes to his office, and there's a letter from the deceased that says, here's my will. I want you to be the attorney for my estate. It's a handwritten will, and things ensue from there. It is once again a novel about race relations in Mississippi, but it isn't preachy in nature. It isn't the diatribes we get today. It was also incredibly refreshing to have a book set in 1988. There are no cell phones. Computers exist, but they're, nowhere near the requirement they are today. Everyone still has a landline. The life was simpler then adage is very much in effect for this book. And it was just nice to slip back into that time period and not have the social media in the book, and to be able to deal with heavier topics in a non-combative manner. I actually may love this book more, or at least as much as A Time to Kill. And in large part, I think it's because of the absence of social media in the book. I've been aware that it's been driving me nuts for a while. It really came home in this book just how much I dislike modernity slipping into stories. There is something timeless about a book that tells its story without relying on resorting to text messages or Instagram reels being mentioned, or Twitter, Facebook, all of it. It just tells the story of people, and I very much enjoy the story of people versus the story of people told through the lens of their social media interactions. I realize that's me showing my age, but you wouldn't be here if you weren't used to that by now. And this was just fantastic. It truly was. The investigations into who the deceased was, why did he choose Jake, what are the repercussions for Jake and his family, and the politics of living in a small town, all of it are in this novel in such a beautifully written way. Is it going to be for everybody? No, because you need to be able to slip into that mindset and to understand that life existed before 2000s and before social media, and you didn't always need to know everything about everyone's day to interact with them in a human manner. Do I even know if I'm making sense to the younger generation? I don't, but this was familiar without it being a book I've ever read before. And I need more like that. I'm not gonna lie. I need more books like that. And that is, again, probably reflected in my June choices. So stay tuned for that. Okay. And the last book I finished this month was An Anthem by Neil Stephenson. This was a buddy read with Chrissy over at Chrissy's Purple Library. And it is a chunker. I will tell you that this is hard science fiction. And when I say that the science went right over my head, I mean, it went right over my head to the point that it was in the stratosphere and I was down here on Earth looking up going, what? I don't understand anything you just said, but okay. However, Fireball, go check the chickens. Look at chickens. The story told in this book is phenomenal. The writing is exquisite. Chrissy and I have been reading this since March. We intentionally took it slow. Life has been life, and as Chrissy would say, and I am so thankful we read this together because as the book opens up, the science is so intimidating. I may have DNF'd it if we were not reading. I'm so thankful I did not, because when I say his writing is exquisite, I am not doing it justice. This is set on an Earth-like planet. It is clearly not Earth, but it is. You can clearly relate to it, and math is somewhat of a religion, but not necessarily as you think of it. We have monks that are in what we would today know as abbeys, and they are separate from the secular world and power and all that stuff. And it tells this amazing story of monks who suddenly are forced to interact with the secular world in manners they didn't expect as the book opens. And at over 900 pages, you are on a journey and you just have to trust the process that the journey is worth it. And let me tell you, the journey is worth it. There is a twist I didn't see coming. And when it happens, you're like, what? And you do that several times in the book. And it is so beautifully written. I have to read everything by him now because this book was my first ever by Stevenson. It will not be my last. He is generally known for science fiction. He does have a couple of crime thrillers. I own one on Kindle. I will get the other one when it goes on sale. They're just fabulous. In fact, Dave unintentionally chose a Neil Stevenson book I picked up from library, unknowing that his prose was exquisite, in his 25 in 2025 list. Oh, I can't wait. I am so looking forward to that book. The story of how the monks and, in Earth terms, nuns, although that is not an accurate correlation, but it's the best description to describe what's going on, relate to the secular world before the first twist happens, and then everything on how they relate afterwards, and all the things they discover along the way is amazing. And how one, I believe he's 18 when the book opens up, one 18-year-old's journey changes the course of an entire planet, if not more, is extraordinary, without it being your typical farm boy goes on quest, saves the world journey. While it didn't make me cry, there are times in the book I was like, what? Wait, what? What just happened? And I'd have to go back and reread. Not because I didn't understand, but because I did not see the twist coming. And when the twist came, I was like, what? And that happened more than once. And I love me a book that can surprise me and is completely unexpected in its depth and its storytelling and its character work. The character work is on par with Robin Hobb, although completely different than Robin Hobb. Exquisite. It was just exquisite. I don't have a better adjective for it. It is not an adjective I use frequently in connection with a book, but it is the only adjective I know that adequately, even remotely, comes close to how beautiful the writing in this book was. It was fantastic. And I just realized I forgot a book. Talk about that in a minute. So, an anthem, or an anthem, is a worthwhile science fiction read. However, it will take you a while. I know Chrissy listened to the audio and said the audio was good. And unless you are in the sciences yourself, almost all of the science goes over heads. But that's okay. It doesn't truly impact the character story arc in any sense of the in no sense did I think that because I didn't understand the science, I didn't understand the story itself, and that is all I ask for from science fiction. And this is right now one of my favorite science fictions of all time. It was that good. Okay, and the last book that I didn't write down on my calendar and I need to was my buddy read with Miriam over at Miriam Elizabeth Reads. If you do not follow her, please go follow the lovely Miriam. That would be Darkfire by C.J. Sansom. This is the second book in the Matthew Shardlake series, and it was better than the first. I do not say that lightly. The first book was fantastic. I read that in March or April. I listened to it actually. This one I read on my Kindle, and Miriam and I both just fell in love and blew through this chunker. Miriam read it physically. I think it's almost 700 pages. It is set in, I want to say 1530, in Tudor England under Henry VIII. Cromwell is still in power. It is May. It is a very hot May. And it is 3 years after the setting of the first book. And Shardlake is our main character. And he has a client come in and begs him to please help his niece, who has been accused of murdering his nephew. And she's refusing to plead. At this time in English law, you could not have a defense lawyer. If you were a defendant, you either pled guilty or innocent. And she was just refusing to speak. And Matthew agrees. And the judge has already made up his mind, doesn't accept Matthew's representation, and he orders Elizabeth to be pressed because she refuses to comply with the court's order. And Matthew is gutted, her uncle is gutted by this decision that they can do nothing about. And suddenly, out of nowhere, they're informed that Cromwell has ordered the judge to give him 12 days reprieve because Cromwell needs a favor from Shardlake. And thus begins the story. And it is so well done. The imagery of the heat in London and the smells from the Thames, because they're, everything is flushed into the Thames, and you have a growing city populace and an unwashed masses, the whole 9 yards. You can almost smell what it was like during a heat wave in London at the time. And then you have all the Tudor politics, and you have these two mysteries that are coinciding, and plot twists you didn't see coming, and the political and religious turmoil that exists in Tudor England at the time is so well done and presented that even if you don't know Tudor history and you don't know the politics behind it or the religious decisions and choices that went into daily Tudor life at the time, you don't miss anything because it just naturally flows in the text itself. This book was absolutely fantastic. It is a beautiful exploration of what was, in essence, a very dangerous time to live. I always joke that my sass and my snark and my inability to not wear my emotions on my sleeve would have, served me incredibly poorly in Tudor England because, well, my mouth would have gotten me in trouble. And you see that reflected in the book. And you see the fear the general populace has about speaking out against those in power and speaking out against those who have the ability to, on a mere whim, destroy their lives, even though they're nobody in relationship to the powerful. All of that is just very, very present in this book without it being a boring history lesson that seems to have no relevance to your life today. I adored this book. Miriam and I have plans to buddy read book 3 together. We're both very much looking forward to it. There's only 7 books in the series. Unfortunately, he's passed away, and it will be a very sad time when we eventually get to book 7. So, that is all the books I read in May. I don't know if I like leaving all the books until the end of the month. We will see how June updates go for reading. It may stay in this format for summer, and you'll understand why when I talk about my June pile of possibilities, but we shall see going forward. What did you read in May? Was your reading month good? Is there anything you'd recommend that I read? If so, please leave a comment down below, like and subscribe, and I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.